Welcome to What Drives You with your host, Mike Gourdet. Human solution consultant from Seattle, Washington. It is now time to sit back, buckle up for the show that drives the asking question of what drives you. And now your host, Mike Gourdet.
Welcome to this week's episode of What Drives You, the show about why we do the things we do. My name is Mike, and I'm your host. I'm a human solutions consultant here in Seattle, Washington, and you're probably wondering about the title. Before we get to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some other topics. The first being is that we're going to diverge a little bit from our normal section because, it was difficult for my guest to be associated with the title. And I understand that it's very difficult. And the second piece is that I wanted to talk about the power of words and language before I talk about the title, because that is a personal story which relates to all the stuff that I've been talking about thus far. So, the power of words. So the human being is one of the few people that has a complex language structure with which to convey thoughts, ideas, and information to each other. We can talk about other animals and things like that, but again, I'm talking about the complexities with which the human being uses these concepts, not the simple things that we relate to animal behavior. We have complex vocalizations which create meaning, and that's the particular thing that is important in today's episode, is the meaning that we attribute to the words and our language. Language is a way that we can convey information to each other in a very complex system. And the interesting part about this is we rely heavily on the spoken word to give us the meanings that we want. And by doing so, we often forget about other things. In fact, we rely on the spoken word so much that we tend to not pay attention to the subverbal communications that's going on. And I know this because one, it's very difficult to not listen to words and watch somebody's body language and emotional responses at the same time. And two, science is showing that even though we may be unconsciously seeing a lot of human behavior and reacting to it, that we don't actually understand what we're doing. That's when you're talking to somebody and you get a really funny feeling, that's usually you picking up on some incongruent behavior behind the words. And if you think about it, words are super important to us for that reason of exchange of information. The interesting thing about that is that we will go with the words more than we will go with the subcommunication. And when I say subcommunication, I'm talking about paraverbals like tone of voice, inflection. We're talking about body language and emotional responses. So, and because I do this all the time, because I study this kind of stuff, I'm more aware of it, but I still want to hear the language behind things. So back to the idea here is language is described by the culture. The culture defines the language in which we convey all this information to each other. So when the culture defines it, it also attributes meaning to particular words and particular ways that we use those words. We also have our personal attributions of meaning to certain things. We do that with symbols, we do that with words, we do this all the time. So again, we have this funny conflict between what is personal and what is for the group. Now, if we take language as just a manner in which we can convey information, there is a leveling out of the emotional pitch that can happen when we use language. But unfortunately, we don't. We attribute emotional responses or emotional meaning to certain words that can elicit responses from other people. And that is very important when we're talking about offensive language. Okay. And again, offensive language is defined by a group or a society or culture. And the interesting thing is when we define those words, we also define the correct or what we perceive as the correct, I can't even say the words, correct reaction to those words. So let's take cussing, for instance. So if I start cussing up a storm right here, I'm going to probably offend a lot of people. And then there's contextual embedding there too, which means that if I say that I'm a Christian and then I start cussing, that means that I am attributing some confusing information out there to people who believe what a Christian should be and act like, whether they are Christian or not. So we do this all the time again, through our lenses that we wear, through our belief systems and our values. So if I come up to you and just cuss at you, you might or might not have a response based on what your personal beliefs about those words are. So if you are somebody who cusses a lot, you have a belief system that supports the use of those words. So me using those words is not going to create a problem for you. But if you are of the belief system that those words should never be used, and then I come up and start cussing at you or cussing around you, you're going to get offended, meaning, and here's where you're probably going to get angry at me. Meaning, I am tripping a trigger that is creating an emotional response in you, and you feel the need to make me stop. Okay, that's where we get compliance behavior and things of that sort. And what I mean by that is that if somebody offends me with their language and my response is to get them to stop, I am externalizing my belief system on that person rather than trying to regulate my own emotions around what that means. Does that make sense? When I am externalizing, I am taking a different role, and I am trying to get compliance out of the person that is offending me. Now, the problem here is that we have control over our reactions. And what happens when we get into a verbal joust about externalizing what my beliefs are? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't defend your beliefs. What I'm talking here is about my attempts, if I'm offended by something that you say to me, my attempts to get you to shut up. That's where we have this conflict of externalizing and compliance behavior. I want you to shut up. You're not shutting up. I'm going to get angry, and I'm going to try and either argue my way to submission, or I'm going to overtly try to get you to stop. Now, this is always going to be a balance. And it's going to be a balance because we have to understand that people don't believe the way we do. And again, if you've listened to this before, when I believe that you believe that the same things that I believe, and then you do something that's not in my belief system, that is going to create pain for me, and I'm going to have a reaction to that. And that reaction is sometimes a compliance behavior. And when I engage in compliance behavior, I am trying to punish you to get you back into the belief system in which we can be comfortable with each other. So do you see how this works? It's a way of blame shifting. And I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash from that because I get backlash anytime I bring this up anyway. Nobody makes you angry. Nobody. You get angry because somebody is doing something that you find goes against your belief systems. You are feeling some sort of pain, which is probably some sort of rejection. And then you are engaging in a way to control that behavior and get them to comply. Nobody makes you angry. You get angry. Now, this is not as simple as I'm making it out to be, and like everything else that I've talked about, because this is part of the human carousel. You know, we want people to like us. We want to be liked by people. We need to be around people. And this is, again, the paradox of the human person, is that we want to maintain our own individuality while belonging to a group. And when we belong to a group, we normally have to tamp down or suppress certain behaviors that the group might not like. See, so again, here's that it's a reverse compliance. If I want to belong to this particular group, let's say, I've used the term knitters before. Let's say I want to get in with a group of knitters. First, I have to understand their culture, and then I have to engage in that cultural fit, meaning I have to learn how to knit, I have to learn how to speak, I have to learn what the rules are around it, and I have to comply with them. If I do that, then I get to be a part of that group. If I don't do that, then there's going to be conflict. They're going to, depending on my level of entrance into this group, they're either going to reject me completely, they're going to be indifferent for a while, or they're going to engage in compliance behavior and punish me if I'm not complying with the group ideal or the group identity. And see how quickly this gets complex. So we do this all the time, and this is one of the reasons why we get into these situations where you might be a Republican and you're calling Democrats certain names, or you might be a Democrat and you're calling Republicans certain names. We are using words to hurt other people in order to get them to comply, to come back, and then we're using words that are offensive to somebody else in order to show our individuality or engage in compliance behavior or other types of dynamics. Okay. What am I saying here? I'm just saying that if we know this to be true, we can then modulate how we do things. We can then modulate how we express ourselves. We don't need to go out and, there's no need for me to go into a church in the middle of a service and start yelling cuss words. There's just no need for me to do that. It doesn't matter if I believe in cussing or not. There's no need for me to go into a church and start yelling cuss words, because it doesn't really do anything but create conflict. Because I know that if I go do that, regardless of what I believe as a Christian or not, if I walk into church and start cussing up a storm, it's probably not going to end well. I'm probably going to offend a lot of people, and they are going to react to my behavior, and they are going to either outright reject me or try to get me to comply with what I'm supposed to be doing. Does that make sense? It's it's a very complex system again, but this is the power that we attribute to words and how we do it both socially and individually. And when I say socially, I don't mean the entire society per se, but I'm talking about any of the small groups within those society that has influence over other groups. And this is again how we see political groups work. They define their identity, then they go and they move through the system of politics trying to get people to get with their identity, often under the auspices of this is the right identity to have. And you see folks that are very into that identity being very specific about how they go out and try to get other people to engage in their identity because they believe that is the right way to go. And then they are usually under the well, they're being controlled by biases that create a situation where they cannot accept other individual beliefs or values, so then they become more compliance oriented. And that is the power of language. So we're going to be right back, and then I will tell you a personal story about the title that you read and show you how this stuff manifests in a simple interaction. So we'll be right back. And welcome back. Okay, so how I became a white supremacist Nazi asshole in less than 10 minutes. All right, so, and it's not what you think. Here's what happened. Okay, so I don't know if anybody I don't know if you're out there listening, maybe or maybe not, you subscribe to dating websites. I do. And I've met a lot of really interesting people on these websites or on these dating sites. And I chat with them. And here's the problem with chatting. Chatting, we're using language in a sterile environment without the benefit of having contextual what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. Contextual reinforcement, meaning there's no body language to help identify what the context of the word is. So what happens when we get texts? And I don't know if you've heard about this with emailing about, when you write an email out, step away and then come back and look at it with fresh eyes because you might contextualize it differently. I don't know if you understand that or have heard of that, but what we do is we will project our lenses onto the words that we are seeing. Right? So a very simple contextual remark we can create an offensive remark out of it, or vice versa. But that's not my point. My point is that when you're, at least this is my experience with online dating these days, is that the first contact is by text, by SMS or whatever, and you basically text back and forth, get to know each other a little bit through this texting process before you move on to, well, in these times, move on to either a phone call or a Zoom date or something like that, where you meet each other face to face and talk. Okay. It's just kind of this weird thing that happens. So here's the idea. Here's the thing. So I met a woman on one of these sites. I'm not going to tell you what site it is. It doesn't matter. But she contacted me. We started having a text conversation back and forth, and we had done this a few weeks with a lot of time in between some of these little interchanges. And the interesting part about is that she was always talking about how crappy things are and how crappy life is. So she already had this sort of negative bent towards everything. At any rate, I'm going for my daily walk. She texts me. I look. It's a text about how crappy things have been in COVID land for the past couple of weeks, and so we started talking a little bit about that. And I ended up asking her if she wanted to go to coffee to talk about this stuff, because it was obvious that she really kind of wanted somebody to talk to about all the negative stuff going on with COVID. Well, that didn't turn out so hot, you know. And here's a tip: if you ask somebody out to coffee and they give you words like "I don't drink coffee," or "I don't like coffee," or anything other than "yeah, sure," they may not be understanding the context of that question, because the context of that question is not to go get coffee. Of course, the context of that question is to meet face to face. And her response was, of course, "I don't like coffee. I like to get my kicks through other means, if you get my meaning." Okay, so so this means that she likes harder stuff. The implication here was that she liked uh, drugs. At any rate, uh, everything went downhill from there. So it was the the request, the response, some time between texts, and then this question popped up. You have apolitical on your profile. What the hell does that mean? Okay, so we can probably contextualize that just fine without necessarily projecting. And here's the situation. On this particular platform, they have questions about your political leanings, and I found that the closest one that I wanted to do was apolitical. And what that means to me is that, and here's where we get into language and definitions and things. What that means to me is I want to remove myself as much as possible from all the hot points of the political battles that are going on, because when I'm studying human behavior, I want to see everybody as neutrally as I can possibly see them. If I get involved in a conversation or I take on a belief of a particular party, I then start losing the objectivity for the other party. Now, just to back up a minute, objectivity is, well, it there's no such thing. There's no such thing as objectivity from a human standpoint. We cannot be completely objective about anything, because there's all these lenses. Again, if you go back and listen to all the rest of them, the shows, I'm talking about these lenses and perception and values and beliefs and stuff. We all have them, and we all feed our information that we're getting input from through all these lenses and making subjective judgments about what that means to us. So there is no objectivity, but we can create a more objective environment or a less objective environment, depending on how we view this. So my point here is that I use this term apolitical on my profile to support the idea that I like to study human behavior. And that's what I said. I said, this is why I put that on there. I answered her question. And it just went downhill from there. The next remark was, Well, that sounds like entitle. What did she say? Entitlement and white privilege. Okay. All righty. Well, she is certainly entitled to her opinion, and I let her know that you are certainly entitled to know your opinion. Then it became, well, she implied I was a Nazi. The next one was implying that I was a Nazi, but she made sure to put it in parentheses. I haven't made that determination yet. And then she sent me an article about why I was a Nazi. And even before I could comment on anything else, in less than a couple of minutes, these texts rolled into my phone that went from what the hell does apolitical mean to I got a lot of white privilege going on to I might be a Nazi to I this is why I'm a Nazi to I'm a white supremacist Nazi asshole. And then she blocked me. And within like I said, within a span of 10 minutes, we went from an okay conversation about how crappy her life has been to this really interesting rage-filled text about who I am as a person, even though she has no idea who I am as a person. Now, I can tell you, I despise and detest white supremacy and Nazism. I do not believe in them. And it makes me angry to think that somebody would think that I am. Now, the asshole part, that's debatable. Oh, well. The point I'm trying to make here is that this happens all the time. So did I have a reaction? Yeah, I did. It hurt because I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. So somebody being mean to me, it hurts. That's what happens. Did I get angry? Yeah, a little bit. I didn't get really angry because I sort of understood what was happening. I knew from prior conversations and also looking at her own profile that she had some stuff going on. And lashing out was not something that I was surprised at all. I was a little surprised at how quickly she lashed out and how violently is not quite the right term, but that statement, that last statement that she called me was a very powerful way to break off any and all communication that she could have with me, despite any reason other than where her beliefs were, if that makes sense. Meaning, she has a lot of these powerful images running around in her mind, and in order to give herself some sort of feeling of power, she's going to lay me out with this stuff. And it's an interesting way of breaking off not even a dating situation. It's an interesting way of breaking off just a conversation over text, because that's all it was. Now, I could take this in many different ways. I could react very massively and text her back and call her names and stuff like that. Or I can look at it through a different set of eyes. I was looking at this particularly through that human behavior construct. I was predicting what was happening based on what I knew. I didn't exactly know where it was going, but when she asked me the first question, what the hell does apolitical mean? I was pretty sure that this was going to be a situation that I ended up not talking to her again. And that was okay with me. But here's I mean, it just went to this place that I didn't expect it to go there. I really expected it to go to, you know, we don't really see things eye to eye. I'm going to go and not talk to you again, like some people do. But it just really ramped up really fast. And from an emotional side, you can see that, even though you can't see the context really in the text so much as the well, there is context to the text. I'm going to back up a little bit on you can see the emotional surge. And what happens when we have an emotional surge is we peak out in what's called a refractory period, and that refractory period is a period of time where we cannot take in any conflicting information that contradicts that emotion that we're feeling. And this happens in any emotional peak. It happens in joy and it happens in anger. And so what happens here is that for whatever reason, this person needed to create a situation where she could break the communication off and go about her life, probably in a way that she felt powerful. And so she got really angry really fast and peaked out and blocked me. And the unfortunate thing is there was nothing I could do after that, because in this situation, once you get blocked, you have no contact with that person ever again. I'm telling you this because I talk a lot about how things are going on outside the house, so to speak, or outside in life, and I don't have a personal connection to it. So I thought I'd share a personal story with you to sort of show you how some of this stuff works and how some of this stuff can really just come up really fast and you're not expecting it, and how you deal with it after the fact. Maybe that's not what you want to hear. Maybe that's not what your experience is, but this is how I experienced this event. And that's how it happened. In less than 10 minutes, I went from a guy that was interesting to her to a white supremacist Nazi asshole that she would never talk to again. And there it is. And that's it. So we'll come right back and we're going to talk about the question of the day, which is, why do we like football so much? And welcome back. The question of the day is, why do we like football so much? So, this past weekend was Super Bowl weekend. I know there's a lot of folks that were really jamming this weekend about it. Really, the question is, why do we like these sports teams so much? Why do we love this activity so much? And from a sociological or psychological perspective, there's a number of reasons why we do this. One is that the biggest one is that we get to live vicariously through that event, right? So we identify with the team. We get to live vicariously through that team, through their wins and through their losses. If they're winning, we get to experience that. And there's also studies to show that when our team wins, when we identify with a team and they win, we will carry that feeling for us a couple of days. And when they lose, we will start to distance ourselves from that team. Unless you're a diehard. But that is one of the reasons why we do this, is that we get to live vicariously through them. We get to celebrate their wins or their losses through that. The secondary reason is that we also get to experience the other fans, the fandom that comes with that particular team. We get to identify with another group of people. So there's that social aspect. Even if we don't know that person, we can sit in the fan section at the stadium, and we get to be a part of this group. We get to belong to this group, and that's an important thing for us. This feeling of belonging. Now, I don't know what is the stronger of the two in this particular instance, whether it's because the living vicariously through the team, there's a primal aspect to that, right? Because especially when we talk about American football, we're talking about a simulation of violence or a simulation of war. And there is a primal need there that is getting satisfied. We get to live vicariously through that violence without having to participate in that violence. So there's that primal thing that's going on there. And then we have the socializing, the belonging to a group piece, which is very powerful too. And those two together make a very powerful combination or bond with that particular idea or sport. Now, there's other things that come into play too. There's, some satellite reasons would be the advertising that goes into Super Bowl Sunday. A lot of people will go into watching the Super Bowl just to see the commercials, because the sponsors spend so much money and create all these awesome commercials that it's become a thing that people identify with. And then there's also the Super Bowl parties, which is another way of socializing in fandom, and we also get to eat. Eating is a very important social activity, and then we get a shared experience of everybody living vicariously through their team's wins or losses. And these are all very powerful motivators for us to be involved in that. Now, I don't know what your stance is on. I particularly don't care much for televised sports. I do like to go to sporting events live, but I'm not a big sports guy when it comes to televised sports. And that's okay. You can call me names. You can call me whatever you want. I've had worse. If you just listen to the last piece, there I've been called worse. I've never been called that, but I've been called worse. So that's some of the reasons why we like football so much. And that is that's it for today. I hope it was educational. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please, send me questions at Mike@whatdrivesyou.net, or if you have some comments. I know this goes on YouTube. You can comment on YouTube. You can comment on my Facebook page, or write me, Mike@whatdrivesyou.net. Let me know what you think. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.